by USA to Taiwan. Whether it happens this way or not, I really can't comment, but these are my quick reflections on the entire proceedings, and that is how it is going to pan out in all probability. Contestation will continue
Right.
between USA and China. There are no quick results of reconciliation. Competition will continue.
Right.
No collaboration will take place because the dependencies are very, very high.
Now, we'd also like to bring into the discussion Raymond Vickery, international affairs expert and former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Sir, thank you so much for joining us in this discussion. To what extent do you believe that essentially what our previous guests discussed with regards to the petrodollar is essentially the name of the game for President Trump right now, that especially with the incursion into Venezuela earlier this year, that Trump is essentially trying to increase the value of the petrodollar, and thus the surprise attacks that were launched on February 28th speak to this. What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, thanks for allowing me to comment on this. I think that General G's analysis is fundamentally correct. I do believe, though, that the question between renminbi, petrodollar, is a long-range concern. China is playing for the long range. I believe that the more immediate problem is to bring back some semblance of the situation which existed before President Trump embarked upon this ill-advised war with Iran, which really is not countenanced under the U.S. Constitution because he doesn't have that power. It's the power of Congress, not the president. And so we have to get back to a situation in which there are means other than kinetic, other than violence, to be able to solve this problem. In order to be able to wage peace, just like you wage war, you've got to have a strategy, you've got to have partners, and you have to have principles. President Trump has none of these at this point. What has happened, of course, in the summit in Beijing basically is an attempt to present a front which manages conflict between China and the United States, but really is not moving the ball forward on the Straits of Hormuz, on the movement of oil, or on any substantive issue between the two countries. What's been announced is very hard to decipher. There are some deals in terms of planes and soybeans. But if you look at the major question facing the world right now, and that is how to restore free passage in the seas, how to get away from the use of violence to solve the problems, getting back to some semblance of respect for the principles upon which United Nations is founded, namely non-intervention in the affairs of other states and not resorting to the use of violence or the threat of violence to solve problems. There has to be a way to get back to it. And I think what's going on here is that the rest of the world, that is the world outside the United States and perhaps Israel, is trying to get its act together and to get together in a way in which the status quo ante the war in Iran can be restored. It's not going to happen in any other way with President Trump. There will be an amelioration from the elections which are coming up, the midterms, I predict. But our institutions are not built to maintain the pace at which President Donald Trump, is moving to relinquish United States position as a leader of the free world and institute a use of force as the and tariffs as a unilateral way in which to further the interest of the United States. This is not in the interest of the United States or the world in the long run. And it's up to great democracies like India, like in Western Europe, Japan, and so forth to come together to try to get us back on track so that the world does not degenerate into the trap which has been indicated, which leads to world war, which would lead to existential issues such as the use of nuclear weapons. That's the very dangerous situation we're in right now, and hopefully others are going to be able to step up. Hopefully the United States electorate will be able to step in to rein this in, but we're on a steeper downward path, notwithstanding the summit which took place in Beijing.
Right. Sir, please stay with us. We'll be right back with you shortly. Now we have some breaking news coming in. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has reaffirmed Tehran's stance as the historical protector of the Strait of Hormuz, following what he described as a fruitful engagement with Indian External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar. In a statement shared on X, Araghchi clarified that Iran remains committed to its duty of ensuring security in the vital maritime choke point, through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply passes. The outreach to India comes at a time of heightened regional tension and diplomatic pressure from Western leaders. Araghchi sought to reassure trade partners, stating that all friendly nations can rely on the safety of commerce through the strait. However, this assurance of safety remains conditional on coordination with Iranian officials. Next up, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and U.S. President Donald Trump have presented a unified front against Tehran, demanding an immediate return to the negotiating table. In a high-stakes phone call following Trump's state visit to China, the two leaders agreed that Iran must be permanently barred from acquiring nuclear weapons and must immediately end its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Merz emphasized that the critical energy shipping route must be open to all international traffic, a direct challenge to Tehran's current policy of selective access. The diplomatic pressure comes at a volatile moment for global markets, while Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi maintains that the strait remains open to friendly nations through official coordination. The Western alliance views the restriction on enemy states as a violation of international maritime law. Now joining us once again to tell us more is retired Major General Sudhakarji, senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert, joining us live from Jaipur. Sir, thank you so much for joining us once again. Here we're essentially seeing some sort of conflict resolution between Germany and the U.S. in the sense that they have now decided to cooperate against Iran, and essentially in the hopes that the Strait of Hormuz is not just solely Iran's pick and choose place for selective access as far as trade is concerned. Do you believe that this will essentially last as far as the relationship between Germany and the U.S. is concerned? What are your thoughts, sir?
Roshan, more than the relationship between Germany and USA, what is at stake is the lack of trust. Trust is one factor which has become the biggest victim. It is because of lack of trust that Iran is unlikely to accept either of the two conditions extended by or outlined by Donald Trump. The first and foremost thing, Strait of Hormuz, if they allow it to be used as an international water, as defined in UNCLOS 1982, and freedom of navigation is restored status quo ante, then Iran virtually will be left with no leverage. It will be as good as Iran surrendering before the USA. Will Iran accept a thing like this after having been hammered, after having lost its the head of the state and 49 senior leaders, so much of mayhem and devastation which has been inflicted on Iran? Will Iran be able to accept this demand That is what the moot question is, and more so when the diplomatic solutions were nearing some kind of a finality. So when diplomacy and dialogue is bringing some solution, and you are hitting the country, and both the times, last year, 12 days of conflict, again the diplomacy process was on. They're very close to finding a permanent solution. So therefore, what it comes to is, after lots of haggling, negotiations, and cajoling, maybe through diplomacy and dialogue, what I see, when it comes to the nuclear enrichment, at best maximum Iran is going to agree. That too also $1 million question, because the stance is hardened. They may agree to what they had agreed way back in 2015. That is the JCPOA, which Donald Trump is averse to. He wants to prove that he is the best president. He is the best person who can negotiate and pressurize Iran and come back with no nuclear weapon. Why should Iran surrender the entitlement of a sovereign country? They have a live example here, Ukraine. Has Ukraine had a nuclear weapon with them and gone against 1994 kind of the treaty and the assurance they were given that any kind of...
Sir, Major General, I'm so sorry to have to interrupt you, but we do have to throw to our next guest. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. We'll speak soon. I'd also like to bring into this discussion Raymond Vickery, international affairs expert and former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Vickery, as far as trust is concerned, do you believe that Iran will essentially give up their hold on the Strait of Hormuz? What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, thanks for allowing me to comment on this. I think that Iran will not give it up just for no concessions on the part of the United States and some semblance of security for Iran. That having been said, it is absolutely necessary for the international community to enforce the freedom of navigation and freedom of the seas principle, which have governed international commerce for many, many decades, if not centuries. The Straits of Hormuz is the tip of the problem, the tip of the spear, because there are many straits around the world. The Straits of Malacca, the strait at the south end of the Red Sea, the Bering Strait. And unless you can enforce this freedom of the seas, it is going to be impossible for
Mr. Vickery, I'm so sorry to have to interrupt you, but that's all the time we have. We'll speak soon. Next up, a significant development has taken place amid the Middle East tensions, where 31 seafarers, including 11 Pakistani nationals and 20 Iranians, have been successfully repatriated after being held aboard vessels seized by U.S. authorities. U.S. authorities have seized multiple vessels in recent weeks since the U.S. Navy imposed a blockade of the Iranian ports in response to Tehran's stranglehold over the Strait of Hormuz, following the failure of their first round of talks to end their over 2-month war. Pakistan FM Ishaq Dar earlier spoke with Singapore's Vivian Balakrishnan and requested his country's support in facilitating repatriation of 11 Pakistani and 20 Iranian seafarers aboard vessels seized by U.S. authorities, which were near Singaporean waters. The vessel is finally repatriated by the U.S., signaling a rare moment of de-escalation in the ongoing maritime standoff. Next up, Africa's top health agency has declared an Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo's eastern Ituri province. This is the 17th instance since the disease first emerged in the country in 1976. An Ebola outbreak from 2018 to 2020 in eastern Congo killed more than 1,000 people. A total of 246 suspected cases and 65 deaths have already been recorded in the new outbreak. The deaths and suspected cases have been recorded mainly in the Mongwalu and Rwampara health zones, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said in a statement. The new outbreak will create more worry for the Central African country, which has been battling various armed groups in the east, including the M23 rebel group, which launched a rapid assault in January last year and has since occupied key cities. Ituri in particular is also battling violence from the allied Democratic Force, an Islamic State-linked militant group which has killed dozens there and in other parts of the east. Now joining us live to tell us more is Ayanuga Alugbenga Paul, and he's a public affairs analyst joining us live from Lagos, Nigeria. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Do you believe that this Ebola outbreak will essentially compound or essentially mix into the hantavirus, and are we on the brink of a essential global outbreak of a virus that could affect us all? What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, looking at the region, thank you first and foremost for having me. But looking at the region where the incident is being recorded right now, one of the things that caused the widespread and easy spread of the Ebola virus in Ituri region is overcrowding, lack of infrastructure, and also lack of access to government facility. I mean, it's only out of the 200 plus victims that have been recognized thus far, only a few were tested in the hospital, and out of the few, 4 samples came back to show that they have Ebola virus out of the 65 that died, which means the other 61 died without necessarily getting tested in an hospital or getting access to an hospital. And like you have rightly mentioned, the cross-border violence by the IDF in crossing from Uganda into Ituri also compounds this situation. Now, with the case of comparison with how maybe antivirus would mix with this Ebola situation and cause a global escalation of a pandemic, I don't see that happening, because basically this is a mining town where the people are basically very poor or middle income, in fact, very low income earners. So apart from the people who run the mines, basically who you can say are middle income, the majority are low income earners. And if there is little traveling activities from international
right, sir, I'm so sorry. That's all the time we have for you right now. Please join us again soon. Thank you. Next up, the Cannes Film Festival 2026 is taking place from the 12th to the 23rd of May, transforming the city of the French Riviera in the south of France into a hub of cinematic excellence and high-profile social events. The 79th annual festival saw the iconic red carpet rolled out once again at the Palais des Festivals to host some of the world's biggest film stars, while the surrounding area buzzes with exclusive parties, industry gatherings, and brand showcases. Here's, in fact, all you need to know about Cannes 2026.
Cannes is back and it is bigger than ever. For the next 2 weeks, the French Riviera turns into cinema's global capital. We are talking world premieres, luxury red carpets, and headline-making fashion moments. All eyes now shift to the most glamorous film festival on the planet. This year, 22 films are fighting for the Palme d'Or. The ultimate prize will be revealed on May 23rd in Cannes. The lineup brings together cinema legends and bold new voices. Pedro Almodovar, Hirokazu Koreeda, and Christian Mingyu return to the spotlight. But the real buzz is around new wave filmmakers shaking up the game. Lucas Don and Liam Misius are bringing fresh storytelling energy. One of the most talked about films is Hope by Na Hong Jin. Starring Michael Fassbender and Alicia Vikander, it is already generating major industry hype. Then there is Sheep in the Box by Koreeda. a technology-driven story exploring AI and human emotion in a changing world. The jury this year is led by Park Chan-wook. He is joined by Hollywood heavyweight Demi Moore, returning after her 2024 comeback success. And the star power does not stop there. Scarlett Johansson, Adam Driver, Rami Malek, Kate Blanchett, and Kristen Stewart are all in the mix. From premieres to red carpets, Cannes is once again a global star magnet. Every screening could turn into a viral moment within minutes. And then there is a tradition everyone talks about, a standing ovations. Some last 4 minutes, some stretch beyond 10. But at Cannes, applause is not just noise, it is news. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report here on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines leading this hour. President Trump leaves Beijing after 2 days of high-stakes talks with Xi Jinping. Both leaders calling the summit historic, with trade, Iran, Taiwan and global energy all on the table. The two men agreed that the Strait of Hormuz must reopen and that Iran must never go nuclear, though Beijing made it clear it believes the conflict should never have happened. And on Iran specifically, Trump tells Beijing that Tehran must make a deal, with both leaders united on one point: the Islamic Republic cannot be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. The pressure comes as fresh attacks near the Strait of Hormuz continue to threaten global energy markets and what remains of regional stability. From New Delhi, India issues a chair's statement instead of a joint communique after BRICS foreign ministers failed to agree on the Middle East conflict. The deadlock lays bare a bloc deeply divided, with members Iran and the UAE on opposite sides of an active war. Turning to West Asia directly, Israel's military says it is striking Hezbollah targets near the southern Lebanese city of Tyre, hours after ordering evacuations in nearby villages. The strikes come as US-brokered talks between Israel and Lebanon continue in Washington, despite an existing ceasefire agreement still nominally in place. Over in Ukraine, a drone strike kills 3 people and damages apartment buildings in the central Russian city of Ryazan. This comes a day after one of Russia's largest attacks of the war struck Kyiv, killing at least 24 people, with President Zelensky calling on partners not to stay silent. A significant move from Washington now. The Pentagon cancels plans to deploy 4,000 troops to Poland, raising fresh questions over President Trump's military strategy in Europe. The decision follows the withdrawal of 5,000 troops from Germany and comes at a deeply uncomfortable moment for NATO allies watching from the sidelines. Over in Britain, Health Secretary Wes Streeting resigns and calls for a Labour leadership contest, deepening the crisis around Prime Minister Keir Starmer after last week's heavy election losses. Starmer says he will fight on, but Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham is now preparing to re-enter Parliament, with the party sensing a moment of reckoning. And finally, CIA Director John Ratcliffe makes a rare visit to Cuba, telling Havana that Washington will only deepen engagement if the island makes what Trump calls fundamental changes. Talks are said to focus on security and law enforcement cooperation as Cuba grapples with a worsening fuel shortage and mounting economic pressure. Those are your top stories for the hour. We start in Air Force One, where President Trump, speaking to reporters aboard the aircraft following his trip to China, delivered a scathing assessment of Iran's current military standing. Disputing recent media reports, the president claimed that 80% of Iran's missile capacity has been destroyed, asserting that US operations have essentially wiped out Tehran's armed forces. In a direct attack on the press, he labelled reporting that suggests Iran has maintained its capacity as treasonous. Addressing the current month-long ceasefire, Trump revealed he was initially against the pause but agreed to it as a favour to Pakistan. However, he warned that the US may return to perform what he called clean-up work once the truce concludes. Despite the hardline military rhetoric, the president signalled a potential diplomatic opening, stating that he would be open to a 20-year suspension of Iran's nuclear program, provided the commitment is real and verifiable. This follows Donald Trump's visit to China, with that backdrop of the lack of success in negotiations overshadowing the talks. Donald Trump with some surprising statements there, claiming that Washington did not want a ceasefire, but only did so as a favour to Islamabad, who has, of course, been playing a major role in mediating the talks between Tehran and Washington. Joining us now on the broadcast is Sol Sadka, a West Asian political commentator. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for joining us, Sol, here on the broadcast. This statement coming from Trump, claiming that the United States does not want a ceasefire, and in reality did so in order to appease Islamabad, is a strange one, and has come quite unexpectedly. Over the past few weeks, of course, he has been maintaining that Donald Trump does want a diplomatic solution to this conflict, with the United States and Iran both bouncing back 14-point plans to one another. What are your thoughts on this statement that Donald Trump has most recently released?
Well, it's very peculiar. You have to try to parse it out. It's hard to really believe that that's actually happening, but there we are. The complexities of the Middle East negotiations that have been continuing over the past couple of years and in full swing over the past 2 months are really quite mysterious. But the one thing that Trump will not be able to get away with is any kind of end to the war without the end of the nuclear program for the Iranians. That has to be his red line in terms of local electoral politics in the United States and his essential diplomatic capital in the world.
What about the pressure Trump is facing, though, in terms of Iran's nuclear enrichment? He has, of course, maintained that that is a key point that needs to be at the top of the negotiating pile. However, the majority of the commentary is around the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. This is, of course, a key point of leverage which Tehran holds. Do you see, given the pressure which Donald Trump is facing, both internally, domestically, and internationally to get that strait reopened, do you see that superseding talks on Iran's nuclear enrichment program?
I do not see that as causing really an issue. The Strait of Hormuz issue is a very minor one for the United States. You have a dissonance between the people that pay the cost of the Strait of Hormuz being closed, which is people all points east in China and India predominantly, and the people who are causing that to happen, and that is the United States and Iran. So there's no particular, of course, the Iranians themselves, now that there's a counter blockade in place, are actually the primary losers. America is hardly affected at all by the Straits of Hormuz. The Americans principally want to have that sea lane opened so they can say they won the war, but the main thing they want is they want the nuclear program in Iran to end, because they know that until that nuclear program in Iran is ended, there will constantly be more rounds of fighting as the Iranians continue to rebuild.
Of criticism coming to the US president. In the fog of war, of course, information remains a spectrum, it seems. But he's labelled reporting that Iran has maintained some military capacity as treasonous. We are, however, seeing reports coming from US intelligence, among other agencies, that Iran does indeed hold certain missile capabilities and certain military capabilities which Donald Trump has said has been decimated. Now, of course, it is without question that Iran's capabilities have been degraded. But what do you make of this statement? Donald Trump entitling those reports as treasonous, some of which have come from his own intelligence committees.
Well, they're not his intelligence committees, they're intelligence committees that are part of the Congress and have a separation of powers. So they're not his, but they are of the United States. He could argue that, but the question is, it doesn't really stack up legally, because the description of what they're allowed to leak and what they're not allowed to leak and what is actually considered to leak is unclear. That will no doubt come out in the future.
Sol, stay with us. We're turning over to our next update. We head to New Delhi now, where the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran received messages from the United States expressing its willingness to resume dialogue to end the war. The statement comes during the BRICS summit and immediately after Donald Trump's visit to China. Iran's Araghchi also confirms speaking to Moscow about offer to store enriched uranium. Araghchi says he has spoken with Russian officials about Moscow's offer to store Iran's enriched uranium and expressed appreciation for the country's intention to help. He said Iran plans to postpone the issue of the Iranian enrichment to later stages of negotiations with the US, but may consider Russia's proposal at an appropriate time. He added Iran is only interested in further negotiating with the US if the other side is serious. Iran has no trust in the United States, he said. The Iranian foreign minister went on to say that Tehran is trying to keep the ceasefire to give diplomacy a chance, but that the negotiations are hurt by a lack of trust. Sol Sadka joins us once again on this story. In terms of those rivaling 14-point plans, Sol, we have seen when it comes to those nuclear negotiations, different points of ways to go about things. Iran says it is open to removing the enriched uranium that it has enriched up to 60% to a different country to store, but it also wants to reserve the right to return the enriched uranium if hostilities and security guarantees aren't upheld by the United States of Israel. The United States, however, wants the complete removal of that enriched uranium to the United States. In terms of a tipping point here, or negotiations, or some point of agreement, where do you think it can be found in regards to this issue?
I honestly don't think there will be any agreement found here. If an agreement would be found on that kind of basis, the agreement will break down. Obviously, it's absurd to have the nuclear material go to a third country, and then if war were to break out again, they would send it back, but this would never happen. It's complete fantasy. It's just the Iranians trying to save face. The problem for them is, of course, that even if they were to sign on an agreement that would ultimately get the uranium out of their country, that wouldn't end the matter, because it's unclear who is really running Iran, whether the people that would sign the deal would have the power necessary to enforce that agreement on the ground. So the whole thing is very unlikely to come to fruition. Most likely the uranium will be taken out of Iran against the will of the Iranians.
And in terms of the guaranteed Strait of Hormuz reopening, Iran has, of course, also asked for what it calls a mechanism governing the Strait of Hormuz. In terms of bringing that to the negotiating table, surely that is high on the US agenda to stop anything like that from happening. We've just seen Donald Trump and Xi Jinping wrap up their summit. They both have agreed that the Strait of Hormuz needs to be reopened. This surely, some critics are saying, holds the most weight in these negotiations now going in. If any other direct meeting will be brought in Islamabad. What are your thoughts?
Like I said, I'm very pessimistic about the prospects of any of these negotiations. The Iranians are making a very big mistake. They've been used to dragging out negotiations in the past, because for them, dragging out negotiations was part of their strategy to build nuclear weapons, and the longer they could drag out the negotiations, the better for them. Unfortunately, now they are blockaded and their economy is suffering very deeply, in addition to all the physical damage they've taken over the past 2 months, which is perhaps a year of their GDP, a huge number. You have 2 million people who've lost their workplaces as a result of the strikes. The economy is suffering very badly. Their currency is depreciating at ever-increasing rates. They're spiraling into hyperinflation at this point. All of these things mean that their previous plan of dragging out negotiations has been flipped against them. The longer the negotiations get dragged out, the more they lose. While the regime might not be able to be toppled with bombs and bullets, it certainly can be toppled by an economic blockade, because simply at some point they will not be able to pay the people who they need to enforce their oppression. And at that point, they will teeter.
But what about
at that point, these negotiations will all become moot, probably before they conclude.
What about the domestic pressure which Donald Trump is facing now to end this war? Americans can, at the end of the day, feel that economic pinch that the Strait of the Strait of Hormuz closure is causing them. Fuel prices are set worldwide, after all. In terms of the domestic pressure which Donald Trump is facing in November, surely that is something which holds serious weight.
Yeah, it could simply be that Donald Trump has already factored in the fact that he's likely to lose the House. This was anyway the likelihood a few months ago that the Republicans would lose the House. And he's taken that into consideration, and he is unbothered. It's in any way his last term. He will only have 2 more years in office after that election, and it will probably not affect him too much, particularly if he can hold on to the Senate, which does look very likely whatever happens. And furthermore, the punishment for the American people in terms of the economic situation there is very mild. Most people are not noticing it. Most people still support his actions in Iran, particularly where it matters, which is for Trump on his side of the political divide. 90% plus in favor of his actions to remove the Iranian nuclear program, and even 80% approve of him trying to change the regime. So there's tremendous public support in America from the people that matter to him, and that will probably make him immune to any kind of pressure from the Strait of Hormuz, which, like we mentioned before, has a very minor effect and a very distal effect on the American public and their spending habits.
Okay, Saul Sacker, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. Great pleasure to talk to you. We turn now to Cannes Film Festival 2026. Forget rigid black tie tuxedos and high heels on the French Riviera. The most exclusive ticket at Cannes ditches haute culture for something far more comfortable. High in the hills, cinema power brokers and independent creators are gathering for the annual Cannes Pajama Party. Co-founded by director Maxim Jago, the logic behind the event is simple. It's impossible to pull Hollywood rank when you are wearing silk robes and slippers. What started as a small penthouse gathering has evolved into a powerhouse market staple. Multi-million-dollar film distribution deals and indie scripts are pitched and signed right next to the buffet. Backed by major global entertainment platforms, you cannot buy your way into this guest list. Entry is strictly limited to industry VIPs and lucky indie filmmakers who won a competitive public lottery. The only catch, a strict family-friendly dress code and a commitment to supporting global climate and educational charities. Proof in the high-stakes world of global cinema, sometimes the best way to close a major deal is to simply get comfortable. More from Cannes now. The 75th Film Festival has its first major Palme d'Or contender, and it is a masterclass in austere cinematic discipline. Polish auteur Paweł Polikowski made a triumphant return to the Crozet with the world premiere of his highly anticipated historical drama, Fatherland. Shot in crisp, luxurious black and white, the film clocks in at 82 minutes, but packs an impressive emotional punch. Set in 1949, at the dawn of the Cold War, the narrative follows the celebrated Nobel Prize-winning German author Thomas Mann, played by Hans Zieschler, as he returns from American exile to travel across a deeply fractured post-war Germany. But it is an Oscar nominee, Sandra Hüller, playing Mann's fierce, steel-nerved daughter Erica, who steals the show. Critics are calling her performance a bayonet of intelligence, capturing the profound grief of a family and a nation reeling from the horrors of Nazism. The film concluded to a standing ovation, instantly igniting early awards buzz and cementing Polikowski's latest feature as a front-runner for the festival's highest honor. For further updates on Day 3, joining us now is Uday Pratap Singh, a senior editor. He joins us live from the newsroom. Uday, what more can you tell us about Day 3 of the French Riviera?
Well, absolutely. The glamorous, fashion has been witnessed already in the last 48 hours, and it will happen today as well on Day 3 at the French Riviera as the Cannes Film Festival, of course, continues. That much-awaited screening, of course, of a couple of serious contenders for the Palme d'Or to also be helped. We've also seen some amazing fashion so far already. So just quickly recapping what's happened there before we talk about what all is expected further. So we did see, of course, some amazing fashion from Demi Moore. She's part of the committee, of course, this year. She's showcased some lovely outfits, gowns that she's been wearing. Big thumbs up from the fashion police to her. Sandra Hüller has also been spotted more than a couple of times on the red carpet there. Interestingly, she's also spoken now about a possible sequel to Project Hail Mary. That again is something that is also evoking a lot of buzz, because that film, of course, did get a lot of critical appreciation and box office success as well this year alone. Now we talk about, of course, also the Bollywood presence there. Well, that has also been quite a lot, because Alia Bhatt, a very renowned actor from India, has, of course, been making waves there at the French Riviera. She's from day one been appearing in multiple...
Hello and welcome. I'm Rashan Gidwani and you're watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the headlines for this hour. Trump and Xi Jinping concur that Tehran cannot develop completed nuclear weapons infrastructure. Both superpowers call for immediately unblocking commerce in the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi rejects American leadership proposals, citing a complete lack of diplomatic trust. Tehran demands verifiable sanctions actions before cooperating at the negotiation table. Deep internal divisions over the war in Iran prevent BRICS nations from releasing a unified diplomatic declaration. The absence of a formal communique highlights growing geopolitical fractures. The U.S. president also discusses high-stakes defense sales directly with the Chinese leader in Beijing. Washington signals an arms transfers decision is coming expeditiously. Abu Dhabi accelerates an essential infrastructure project to route crude around the Strait of Hormuz. The strategic move aims to secure global energy exports amid intense regional conflict. Prime Minister Modi signals a new era of cooperation by signing major pacts targeting defense and energy infrastructure with the UAE. Both nations strengthen their geopolitical alliance through comprehensive agreements. The Pentagon scraps planned military defense reinforcements in Eastern Europe without prior notice. This extensive pullback sparks immediate strategic concerns across all NATO nations. Department of Justice officials prepare charges against the revolutionary former president of Cuba. The shock legal offensive threatens to completely upend current Caribbean diplomatic channels. And now here are the top stories for this hour. The Pentagon has canceled plans to temporarily deploy 4,000 U.S.-based troops to Poland, a surprise decision that renews questions about President Donald Trump's expected troop cuts in Europe. Poland, which looks to Washington as its prime security guarantor amid Russia's war in Ukraine, hosts around 10,000 U.S. soldiers, the second largest American troop presence in Europe after Germany, most of them deployed on a rotational basis. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said he had received assurances that Poland's security would not be impacted by any decisions on the U.S. troop presence. The U.S. has been reviewing its troop presence in Europe and has long been expected to scale it back, following demands from Trump that NATO take a larger role in the defense of Europe. The Pentagon has not yet detailed how it envisions future troop laydowns across the continent. Trump has also been angered that European allies did not join the U.S. war against Iran and sparred with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who last month said Iranians were humiliating the U.S. in negotiations. Let's listen to what the Polish PM said on the incident.
Otrzymałem zapewnienie, i to jest też dla mnie ważne, że te decyzje mają charakter logistyczny i one nie wpłyną bezpośrednio na możliwości odstraszania i nasze bezpieczeństwo, jeśli chodzi o współpracę polsko-amerykańską. Polska była, jest i będzie najbardziej stabilnym, najbardziej lojalnym i skutecznym sojusznikiem zarówno Stanów Zjednoczonych, jak i innych państw natowskich. Jestem przekonany, że będziemy mogli liczyć dziś i w przyszłości także w tej sprawie na wzajemność.
And now joining us live to tell us more is Vil Skinari, Finnish MP, joining us live from Hamburg, Germany. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Now, with regards to this development as far as troops not being deployed to Poland, do you believe that Poland is now on the target list as far as Ukrainian and Russian attacks are concerned? Are they more now of a essential victim with regards to these attacks? What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm here in Germany, and as you know, we also had an incident in Finland this morning. But when it comes to Poland, of course, I must emphasize that all in all, the question is that Russia started the war on Ukraine. And when we talk about the drones, there are many reasons behind, there are many many facts behind that. But of course, we have to respect the Polish sovereignty and their decision making and listen to the Prime Minister carefully. What's their analysis on this particular case?
Right. Now, like you mentioned, essentially what it comes down to is that there have been essentially many kind of rotations in the sense that what you mentioned with Finland is also happening. Do you believe that this will essentially kind of make President Trump in the U.S. break away from NATO in the long run? And will he ever be able to come back? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think first we have to distinguish these single incidents when it comes to drones. Things happen. And of course, Finland is well prepared. Finland has probably the most advanced comprehensive security platform in place. So, of course, we are concerned, but we are not afraid. When it comes to Mr. Trump, of course, NATO is a backbone of the security arrangement of Finland and Sweden as well, because we are the most recent members of NATO. And we have a reason to believe that US is to remain as a trusted partner. But at the same time, I want to emphasize that as a Nordic country like Finland and the Nordics, including Europe, we are building up our own sovereignty, including defense, but especially including technology, because when we talk about sovereignty, we must understand, and it's more and more about technology sovereignty and things related to that.
Right. Now, with the drones in mind here, do you believe that essentially what needs to happen across all nations and governments is that the technology needs to ramp up as far as autonomous drone warfare is concerned? I've seen some reports that essentially what's happening in the Middle East is essentially autonomous as far as drone warfare is concerned. How are you essentially, and your government essentially, applying new technologies to help defensive capabilities and offensive capabilities?
Well, Finland is a technology country, and we are the forerunners when it comes to technologies, sensors, networks, with Nokia and with the other telcos. So for us, of course, it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to build up the solutions, not just for Finland, but for Europe as a whole. And as you might know, we also in talks with India, for instance, that how we build up the data sovereignty and data capturing sovereignty, because everything is about data. And I must say that for a country like Finland, it's obvious that we want to be forerunners when it comes to technology. And Europe has to understand as a whole that it's all about the tech, it's all about the tech sovereignty. But of course, we have to invest more. But the most important thing is that we connect the dots when it comes to EU 27 countries and work with our trusted partners. And I underline the word trust.
Sir, thank you so much for joining us. We'll speak soon. Much appreciated. Next up, Britain's Labour government is facing a major political crisis, with Prime Minister Keir Starmer under open pressure from within his own party. The crisis intensified after UK Health Secretary Wes Streeting resigned from the cabinet, saying he had lost confidence in Starmer's leadership. Streeting became the first senior minister to quit, sparking fresh talk of a possible leadership challenge. Allies including Jess Phillips, Josh Simmons, Zubair Ahmed, and Alex Davies-Jones have also stepped down or called for change. At the center of the power struggle is Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester and a former Labour cabinet minister. Burnham is emerging as the main alternative to Starmer, with support growing among Labour MPs and party grassroots. Josh Simmons' resignation from the Makerfield seat has allowed a path for Andy Burnham to return to Parliament. More than 90 Labour MPs now believe Starmer can no longer lead Labour into the next general election after poor poll numbers and deepening internal divisions. Under the UK's parliamentary system, a Prime Minister can be removed if they lose support inside their own party. MPs can trigger a leadership challenge. Cabinet ministers can resign to increase pressure, or the PM can be forced to step down. For now, Starmer remains in Downing Street, but the battle for control of the Labour Party is now fully underway. And of course, when it comes down to this story, we have seen many developments with regards to Keir Starmer and spoken to many analysts and experts. And of course, we will be having one on the show with regards to the story in just a little bit. In the meantime, let me essentially recap what I just mentioned. Britain's Labour government is facing a major political crisis, with Prime Minister Keir Starmer under open pressure from within his own party. So essentially that brings to mind that yes, with regards to the Labour Party, essentially when it comes down to Keir Starmer, he can be asked to quit. Will this be the case? We will now speak to some guests with regards to this story, and they will provide some insights. Let's discuss this crisis in greater detail. The crisis intensified after UK Health Secretary Wes Streeting resigned from the cabinet, saying he had lost confidence in Starmer's leadership. Now, Streeting became the first senior minister to quit, sparking fresh talk of a possible leadership challenge. Allies, including Jess Phillips, Josh Simmons, Zubair Ahmed, and Alex Davies-Jones, have also stepped down or called for change. At the center of the power struggles is Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester and a former Labour cabinet minister. Burnham is emerging as the main alternative to Starmer, with support growing among Labour MPs and party grassroots. Josh Simmons' resignation from the Makerfield seat has allowed a path for Andy Burnham to return to Parliament. And now joining us live to tell us more is Keith Vaz, former British minister, joining us live from London. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Vaz. Now, essentially, with Streeting's departure here and Andy Burnham with that could be a potential candidate here, what are your thoughts on how this will all develop in time to come?
Good afternoon, Roshan. I think this is fascinating. Just when we thought we'd have a stable government for 5 years, we seem to have caught the Conservative Party's disease, which is you change your prime minister at least every 2 years, and sometimes, in the case of Liz Truss, you change them every 44 days. So this is something very unusual to the Labour Party. I've been in the Labour Party till I retired from politics 5 years ago, for over 40 years. And I've never known a situation like this. Of course, there's always people in the cabinet who want to be prime minister. In Andy Burnham's case, and he is a very talented individual who's been a very successful mayor of Manchester. I remember when he came to talk to me about him running for mayor of Manchester, and I said, I thought it was a very good idea. What are you going to do here? Jeremy Corbyn's going to be here forever and ever. And he went off and he became a very successful mayor. But the fact is, I think people are clutching at anyone who isn't Keir Starmer. You've got a group of people, Andy Burnham, Wes Streeting, possibly Ed Miliband, Angela Rayner, possibly Yvette Cooper, maybe Bridget Phillipson. When you've got a cabinet, anyone can actually potentially put themselves forward. And in the current climate, anyone can make sure that they are going to do well. We've even got someone who's only been in Parliament for 2 years, someone called Al Cairns, a former army officer who's decided to stand. Andy has tried several times to be the Prime Minister and leader of the Labour Party. I think he's been unsuccessful twice. He was runner-up last time. And I did not support him for either of his attempts to become leader. My sister, who's still in Parliament, she did support him. I supported other candidates, but I think he'd make a great Prime Minister. I think that Wes Streeting would make a great Prime Minister. Angela Rayner, I think the party probably feels it's time to have a woman Prime Minister. The issue concerning her tax has been cleared up, and she's ready to run. So I think it's fascinating, but the only people who probably will not find it fascinating are the British people. They don't like this kind of thing. As much as they don't like Keir Starmer, and clearly they don't, because of the results of the election. It's also the Labour brand that has been tarnished. I'm not naive enough to believe that a new party leader is suddenly going to change the brand. If that was the case, then the Conservatives would have done it every time they change Prime Minister. But every time they change Prime Minister, the polling for their party went down, not up. Everyone loved the thought of having Rishi Sunak until Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. And then they wanted someone else, or Liz Truss, or Theresa May, or Boris Johnson, or David Cameron. So I think we've had, in the last 10 years, we've had 6 Prime Ministers. And in the 50 years before that, 50 years, we'd had 6 Prime Ministers, partly because Blair and Thatcher served for 10 and 11 years each. So it's fascinating time here, not so much for the British people, but certainly for those interested in politics, Roshan.
Right. Now, let's discuss how the PM can essentially step down in the event that essentially there is distaste with Keir Starmer's leadership. What will this process look like? How long will it take till he essentially leaves office?
Well, he hasn't said he is going to stand down, and he made the point that he's not going to, in quotes, walk away. He's just won a massive mandate at the last election. And before that, he was leader of the opposition for 4 years. The worst job in British politics is not Prime Minister, it's being the leader of the opposition. It's a hard, tough job. He did it for 4 years. He's been Prime Minister for 2 years. So, in effect, he's only been around for 6 years in British politics. Before that, of course, he was a Director of Public Prosecutions. So there's no need for him to go. He can stay for as long as he likes, until one Labour MP triggers, it only takes one, triggers a leadership election, and 81 people send a letter to the Chief Whip or the General Secretary of the Labour Party, I can't remember which, in the case of the Conservatives, it's their Chief Whip, saying they would like to formally challenge the sitting leader of the party. They're not challenging the Prime Minister, Roshan, they're challenging the leader of the party. It just happens that the leader of the Labour Party, it's the biggest party, will be the next Prime Minister. So Keir Starmer could do this. He could go to King Charles and say, well, there's complete turmoil, and I would like you to dissolve Parliament. If he did that, it would be catastrophic for the Labour Party, you know? Right. And so he's got a number of options, Roshan. When you're in an incumbent Prime Minister, you've got a number of options. You've got the power of patronage. You are still the most powerful person in the land. So he can hang on for as long as he wants. Monday is the next trigger day, because if Andy Burnham gets permission to stand in this by-election, and he probably will, and he is becomes the Labour candidate, there's then got to be a by-election, and it's Keir Starmer who decides when that by-election is going to be. He makes that decision. So he could say it's going to be in July, and therefore everyone has to wait a very long time. And in the last local elections, Reform, the party everyone's terrified of at the moment, got a majority of votes in that very seat. So there's a number of hurdles before Andy Burnham gets into the House of Commons. And then, of course, you have to have a leadership election, which could take months.
Right. Let's discuss this Reform Party. Why is everyone terrified of that party?
Well, I think they're terrified because they're very successful. Anyone who is very successful, Roshan, people think, oh my God, they're so, powerful, they're so strong. They've done very well in the recent elections. Don't forget, they've not been around for very long, and they won over 1,000 seats, council seats. They've got a number of councils that they now control. They are, in a sense, outside the establishment. People are, to some extent, fed up with the two governing parties, Conservative and Labour. The Liberal Democrats have not been in office for 150 years. And so they've decided to go for the maverick parties, if you like, Reform on the one hand and the Greens on the left. So they are worried because They don't necessarily stand for very much apart from a tough immigration policy, but they do show that they can win. And everyone is afraid of winners.
Very well put, Mr. Vaz. Thank you very much for joining us once again. We'll speak soon. Now we have more breaking news coming in. United Arab Emirates issued a blistering rejection of Iranian allegations. In a formal statement, the UAE reaffirmed that it reserves its full sovereign, legal, diplomatic, and military rights to respond to any Iranian threat or hostile act. This follows a sharp verbal exchange where Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi accused Abu Dhabi of direct involvement in military operations against Tehran by providing bases and intelligence to the U.S. and Israel. Emirati Minister of State Khalifa Shaheen al-Marar categorically rejected these claims, describing them as malicious attempts to justify Iranian attacks that have targeted UAE civilian infrastructure. Al-Marar revealed that since February 2026, the UAE has intercepted nearly 3,000 Iranian-linked missiles and drones aimed at airports and energy networks. Next up, the United Arab Emirates will store up to 30 million barrels of crude oil in India's Strategic Petroleum Reserve, following Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the UAE, as both countries move to strengthen energy and security cooperation amid continued regional instability. The two sides have signed agreements related to strategic petroleum reserves and the supply of liquefied petroleum gas, further expanding their long-term energy partnership. The deal also explores the possibility of storing Indian crude reserves in Fujairah in the UAE as part of India's wider energy security strategy. The agreements come at a time of heightened concern over global energy security following the Iran conflict and disruptions around the Strait of Hormuz, which have impacted shipping and energy markets across the region. The UAE's recent decision to leave OPEC is also expected to boost its oil output, potentially providing greater energy support to major importers such as India. Next up, millions of Palestinians marked the 78th anniversary of the Nakba this Friday, a day of remembrance for the catastrophe of 1948 that saw the mass expulsion of 750,000 people. This year, the commemoration carries a heavy weight as residents of the Jenin camp in the West Bank face new waves of displacement mirroring the stories of their ancestors. For many survivors, the current reality in the occupied territories and the ongoing confinement in Gaza signify that the Nakba is not a static historical event, but a continuous process of dispossession. The scale of modern displacement is staggering. More than 6 months after the October ceasefire, over 2 million people in Gaza remain crammed into less than half of the 40-kilometer strip. Hemmed in by Israeli-controlled zones, families continue to preserve the keys and deeds to their original homes, symbols of a promised right of return under UN Resolution 194. 4 Palestinians displaced during the Nakba in 1948 tell stories of enduring loss as decades later they are uprooted again, this time from Jenin camp in the occupied West Bank, where residents have fled successive Israeli army operations. Listen in to their stories.
أنا من البلد نسيت طلعنا من زرعين إحنا طلعنا من زرعين هاي لو يوم ما الكل ضربوا علينا هم وصارت قوية يعني بين العرب واليهود خلاص الناس بدها ترحل تلاقي طريق بركين كلها نسوان وولد مزين من زرعين ومن القرى والبلد فضيت ما حدا بيقدر لا يحارب ولا يعمل شيء رحلت الناس كل مرة حملة بقتة أو على أولادها غيرات يعني شاردينها الناس ظلت هالشرادة هذا اللي بس بصحى
15/5 الجمعة ذو القعدة 27/11
شو بعني لكم هالتاريخ هذا 15 يوم؟
بعني لنا يعني أكبر خسارة خسرناها.
يوم صعب عليك.
أكبر خسارة خسرنا.
ولكن يعني في النتيجة الخوف من يعني قتل اليهود للناس أو الواحد يعني قسم منهم من الناس لا يملك يعني سلاح، لذلك يعني قرروا إنه يعني إنهم يطلعوا على أساس إنه في ناس بقوا يقولوا إنه ترجعوا بعد أسبوع، بعد أسبوعين، بعد 3، تتحسن الظروف، تتحسن الأحوال، وبعدهم لحد الآن بيستنوا بالعودة.
Next up, Guillermo del Toro's cult masterpiece, Pan's Labyrinth, has returned to the Riviera for a special 20th anniversary screening in the Cannes Classics section. 2 decades after it received a record-breaking 22-minute standing ovation, the dark fantasy has been digitally remastered for a new generation. Del Toro, who attended the premiere alongside collaborator Alfonso Cuarón, described the original reception as a rush of pure human emotion.
Guillermo del Toro's cult classic is returning to Cannes Film Festival. Pan's Labyrinth is back in the spotlight 2 decades later. The film is being showcased in the Cannes Classics section, now digitally remastered for a new global audience. Del Toro once received Cannes' longest standing ovation, a record groundbreaking 22 minutes applause greeted the film. Speaking to the Reuters news agency, Del Toro called it an unforgettable moment. He described it as a rush of pure human emotion.
It's very strange and beautiful. First of all, the first 5 minutes, you feel great. The next 5 minutes, I mean, it's a commute, right? 20-something minutes, 22, 23 minutes is a commute from home to the office. And that's the way the time starts becoming, the credits are over and the ovation still goes. And then Alfonso Cuarón was there with me because we produced the movie together, and he said, let it in, man. See, so I was tense. I'm not very good with praise. And he said, let it in. Let love let it go in. And I experienced it like that. It was a rush of human emotion.
The Spanish-language fantasy is set during Franco-era Spain, and it blends dark history with myth and magical realism. The story follows a young girl facing brutal reality at home, and she discovers a mysterious faun who offers her dangerous tasks. Her journey unfolds alongside a pregnant mother in decline and a violent military stepfather ruling the household. Del Toro revealed the film was born during a creative low. He was struggling after the September 11th attacks in New York. What emerged became one of the modern cinema's most celebrated films.
And we basically arrived just in time with the print. And then we got that 23 standing minute ovation. And 23 minutes is a commute. It's what it takes you to go from your office to your house. And it was so weird because in spite of my great body, I'm not used to adulation.
A dark fairy tale that resonated with audiences worldwide. Now restored and enhanced, it returns to the big screen, including a special 3D theatrical re-release later this year. For Cannes, it is more than a screening. It is a return of a moment that defined the festival's history. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
Hello and welcome. I'm Rashan Gidwani and you're watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the headlines for this hour. President Trump leaves Beijing after 2 days of high-stakes talks with Xi Jinping. Both leaders calling the summit historic with trade, Iran, Taiwan, and global energy all on the table. The two men agreed that the Strait of Hormuz must reopen and that Iran must never go nuclear, though Beijing made clear it believes the conflict should never have happened. And on Iran specifically, Trump tells Beijing that Tehran must make a deal, with both leaders united on one point. The Islamic Republic cannot be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. The pressure comes as fresh attacks near the Strait of Hormuz continue to threaten global energy markets and what remains of regional stability. From New Delhi, India issues a chair statement instead of a joint communique after BRICS foreign ministers failed to agree on the Middle East conflict. The deadlock lays bare a bloc deeply divided, with members Iran and the United Arab Emirates on opposite sides of an active war. Turning to West Asia, Israel's military says it is striking Hezbollah targets near the southern Lebanese city of Tyre, hours after ordering evacuations in nearby villages. The strikes come as U.S.-brokered talks between Israel and Lebanon continue in Washington, despite an existing ceasefire agreement still nominally in place. In the war in Ukraine, a Ukrainian drone strike kills 3 people and damages apartment buildings in the central Russian city of Ryazan. This comes a day after one of Russia's largest attacks of the war struck Kyiv, killing at least 24 people, with President Zelensky calling on partners not to stay silent. A significant move from Washington, the Pentagon cancels plans to deploy 4,000 troops to Poland, raising fresh questions over President Trump's military strategy in Europe. The decision follows the withdrawal of 5,000 troops from Germany and comes at a deeply uncomfortable moment for NATO allies watching from the sidelines. Over in Britain, Health Secretary Wes Streeting resigns and calls for a Labour leadership contest, deepening the crisis around Prime Minister Keir Starmer after last week's heavy election losses. Starmer says he will fight on, but Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham is now preparing to re-enter Parliament, with the party sensing a moment of reckoning. Finally, CIA Director John Ratcliffe makes a rare visit to Cuba, telling Havana that Washington will only deepen engagement if the island makes what Trump calls fundamental changes. Talks are set to focus on security and law enforcement cooperation as Cuba grapples with a worsening fuel shortage and mounting economic pressure. And here are the top stories for this hour. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on his visit to the UAE, has held high-level talks with President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan in Abu Dhabi, addressing regional security and bilateral economic ties. During the delegation-level meeting, Prime Minister Modi emphasized that maintaining a free, open and safe Strait of Hormuz remains India's highest priority. He noted that the ongoing conflict in West Asia impacts global stability, reiterating New Delhi's position that dialogue and diplomacy are the only viable paths forward. The two leaders oversaw the signing of several key agreements, including a memorandum of understanding on India's strategic petroleum reserves and long-term liquefied petroleum gas supplies. Additionally, a framework was established for a strategic defense partnership focusing on military interoperability and joint defense production. The visit also yielded a $5 billion investment package from the UAE targeted at Indian infrastructure and financial markets. Abu Dhabi marks the first stop of the Prime Minister's 6-day, 5-nation tour, with his next destination being the Netherlands. Let's listen in to what Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said about the Strait of Hormuz.
पश्चिम एशिया क्षेत्र में युद्ध की परिस्थिति का प्रभाव आज पूरे विश्व पर दिखाई दे रहा है। भारत ने हमेशा समस्याओं के समाधान के लिए डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी को प्राथमिकता दी है। हॉर्मुज़ को फ्री, ओपन और सेफ बनाए रखना ये हमारी सबसे बड़ी प्राथमिकता है।
And now joining us live to tell us more is Gerard Al-Phil, senior economist, joining us live from Dubai. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to talk to you again. Tell us more about this $5 billion investment package and essentially how that's going to contribute to India's economy.
Yes, good afternoon. I think it's a most momentous occasion now for Narendra Modi and also to secure this investment because the US dollar is very strong. Unfortunately, the Indian rupee falls from one all-time low to the other. So that means the dirham and the dollar, dirham, which is pegged also to the US dollar, has a strong purchasing power in India. And this is only a natural consequence of the recent weeks and months of developments. India was very critical of Iran because also these attacks, these more than 500 and almost 1,000 missiles and drones, which Iran shot at the UAE here. It means when you slap the UAE, you also hit India because the total population of the UAE is 11.6 million. The Indian community, the NRIs, non-resident Indians, are 4 million people. So there's the biggest community, expat community here. So when you hit the UAE, you slap also India. And this is now also a reward from the UAE, from Abu Dhabi. His Highness the President, UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed, to welcome India as an old friend, Modi as an old friend, and also as a preferred investment destination, because it shows more and more that there's an access between India, the UAE, and also the US, which is growing stronger, and India needs investments more than ever because of the low rupee, unfortunately, and also high energy prices. India is a net energy importer, and we saw already the stress on streets and filling stations. All goods which are produced have to be transported, and with a low rupee, that makes the transport costs also internationally even more expensive because the dollar valued barrel oil means also then higher costs for India. So I think it's the natural way forward. Going back to your point that this is a 6-day, 5-nation visit, this is the only stop of Narendra Modi in the Middle East. And this shows also the high evaluation of the UAE as a partner.
Right. Let's discuss how these regional partners, like you mentioned, this long-standing friendship between the UAE and India, as well as other nations around the world essentially linking up, means that Iran is getting more and more isolated. Iran at this point doesn't have anyone else to turn to. Do you believe that in due time that Iran will be so isolated as these regional partners develop their bonds to the point whereby that Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, as far as commerce is concerned, will be opened up and Iran and the IRGC will essentially eventually fall? What are your thoughts on this?
This depends definitely on the internal struggle, how the internal struggle in Iran will end, because there obviously there are differences in the high echelon in Tehran. And you're right, yes, the isolation is more and more visible. Now, during the visit of President Trump in Beijing, China pledged not to send any more weapons to Iran. And Pakistan is also more on the US side. And Pakistan was rewarded with the fresh negotiations, which were happening in a stuttering mode in recent weeks. Indirect talks between Iran and the US and Pakistan as a mediator. Going back also to the attacks on the UAE, it's interesting because Iran has not learned of its own history. When the late Ayatollah Khomeini came from Paris, from his exile, back to Tehran in 1979 to launch the Islamic Revolution in Iran, his plane, his chartered Air France plane, was packed with dozens of journalists of several nations, of many nations, dozens of nations. And this was also a kind of life insurance. He said, when I have all these foreign journalists on the plane, on the Boeing 747, the jumbo jet, no one will dare to shoot the plane down. And this happened. Also, he landed safely. And now it's exactly the reverse impact of Iran. They attacked the UAE, where we have 200 nations here living in the country. So you are now in trouble with almost the whole world. I'm from Germany, and we have 200 nations living in the UAE.
Very interesting. Sir, please stay with us. We'll be right back with you. Next up, Taiwan's foreign minister issued a defiant response today following high-level talks between President Trump and Xi Jinping, asserting that China has no right to make claims on Taiwan's behalf internationally. In a series of pointed statements, the minister emphasized that the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China are not subordinate to each other, reaffirming Taiwan's status as a sovereign and independent democratic nation. While monitoring the diplomatic developments in Beijing, Taipei highlighted its good communication with Washington, noting that the U.S. continues to oppose any unilateral change to the status quo, pointing to China's expanding military activities as the true source of regional risk. The foreign minister vowed to deepen cooperation with the U.S. and other like-minded Indo-Pacific partners. The message remains clear. No political framework set by Beijing can change the reality of Taiwan's independence. Now, joining us once again is Gerard Al-Fil, senior economist, joining us live from Dubai. Sir, essentially with Taiwan's stance here, do you believe that anything can rock that? What are your thoughts?
Well, in the first meeting when President Trump arrived in Beijing, China's paramount leader Xi Jinping made it clear that Taiwan was part of China, is part of China, will always remain part of China. Your country, India, is supporting the One China policy. My country, Germany, is supporting One China policy. The US is supporting One China policy, and the majority of the states of the world say also there's only one China. I think it's almost only a question of time when a peaceful reunification will happen. There was already the opposition leader in Beijing recently, and I think the path towards a reunification is more and more clear. I pointed out in earlier interviews this year that I see more and more the world moving to the triad, that the US, Russia, and China are doing the deals over the heads of the Europeans and other regions. And we see this more and more. We saw the massive attacks by Russia on Ukraine in recent days. And at the same time, President Trump, as you said earlier in the news flow, also will not deploy 4,000 troops in Poland. And this is almost a signaling to Russia, we will not escalate further tensions in Eastern Europe. And the way to the triad is more and more open. There is no place then for an independent Taiwan.
Right. Sir, thank you very much for your insights. We'll speak soon. Much appreciated. Next up, a tight-lipped government press conference about the possible drone threat in the Uusimaa region of Finland took place, where officials did not confirm that the possible drone incursion originated from Ukraine, but said that no stray drone has been found. This isn't first such incident for Finland, as similar drone incursions took place a month ago. Prime Minister Petteri Orpo said authorities did not overreact when they advised people to stay indoors and temporarily suspend air traffic. Finland received advance information about the incursion from allies at around 1 a.m. about a drone carrying an explosive payload that was roughly 500 kilometers away and potentially heading toward Finland. The Finnish PM said such incidents cannot be allowed. Now the Finnish airspace are already open. Let's hear what the Finnish PM has said.
Suomalainen heräsi tänään aamulla siihen, että sisäministeriön pelastusviranomainen oli antanut yöllä droonivaroituksen Uudenmaan alueelle. Osa saattoi herätä Hornet-hävittäjien jylinään taivaalta. Tässä oli kyse siitä, että viranomaiset saivat aamuyöllä tiedon siitä, että Suomen alueelle voi harhautua droneja. Vaaratiedote annettiin varhain aamulla, ja tämä osoittaa sen, että edellisestä kerrasta on opittu. Vaaratiedottaminen ja varautumistoimien laajuus oli tässä tilanteessa perusteltua, kun kyseessä oli Suomen tiheimmin asuttu alue.
And now joining us live to tell us more is Freddie Svain, former Danish diplomat, joining us live from Copenhagen. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. With regards to these drone strikes, yes, it's been reported that when the announcement went out that civilians were not at all hinged in the sense that they accepted it. But do you believe that with rising technology, that drone strikes and autonomous drone technology will essentially become a greater threat for civilians in the EU? What are your thoughts, sir?
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, I think given what we are seeing and the really fast technology advancement and the use of drones and technologies alike, I think we'll be much more exposed to it. And of course, we need to build up sufficient technology so we can counter or at least secure that these drones are not entering our airspace. So I feel very confident that the EU and the member states will do whatever is possible to secure that their citizens are not being attacked or suffering from drone attacks. And by the way, in September last year, we had similar, many reported drone activities in Denmark. A report was made, has not been published yet. And it seems that, at least from outside, that all these observations of the drones did not really have anything to do with drones. So we are in a process where we have to adapt to this new technology. Of course, given the war in Ukraine, which is just in our neighborhood, we are being much more exposed to this new form of warfare.
You mentioned that the EU essentially needs to do whatever is possible. What does that entail exactly?
First and foremost, it entails that we coordinate far better, that we build up our own security policy, that we also, with NATO, that the European members of NATO are doing much more in order to counter this kind of reported, perhaps real attacks, we don't know. And we can see that these drones are perhaps not so easy to control, and that's of course obviously a big issue if they're hitting populous areas and so forth.
Sir, essentially with regards to this story, one last question. What is currently in place? Do you have any intel or understanding of the technology in place that is essentially able to locate the drones whilst they're in the sky? Is this a sort of GPS system? What more can you tell us?
I think it's well known that we have to use satellite technology, radar-based technologies in order to detect what is crossing over the heaven, so to say, or at least the universe. And I think that is also seen here, that there was a kind of forewarning. So the place, the country concerned had some time really to react and so forth. So I think we see a jump in technology to really to detect the drones, and hopefully that will also make it far easier to control that they are not hitting or entering into our airspace.
Right. Mr. Savain, please stay with us. We'll be right back with you shortly. Next up, Ukraine has brought home 205 service personnel from Russian captivity in the first phase of a major prisoner exchange with Moscow. President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the swap, calling it part of a broader 1,000 for 1,000 deal agreed during a U.S.-brokered 3-day ceasefire initiative led by President Donald Trump. The returned Ukrainians include soldiers, sergeants, and officers from multiple branches of the military, many of whom had been held since 2022, including defenders of Mariupol and the Azovstal steelworks. The United Arab Emirates played a key humanitarian mediation role in the exchange. Alongside the living prisoners, both sides also exchanged the bodies of fallen soldiers, with Russia returning 526 bodies to Ukraine. Ukrainian personnel are now undergoing medical checks and psychological rehabilitation, while the freed Russian troops have been transferred to Belarus for support before returning home. Let us listen to some service personnel from Russian captivity who were being released.
Радість. 4 роки чекав. Дуже жалко, що довго. Але там ще хлопці залишилися азовстальці. Особливо офіцери. Зі мною вони чекають і надіються. Вони передають своїм рідним привітання, деякі я особисто передам. Але вони надіються на свою батьківщину, що вона їх витягне звідти.
Це не передати словами. Не віриться до. Хочеться сказати одне. Коханечко, я вже вдома. Зустрічай, Люба.
And now joining us live to tell us more is Freddie Savain, former Danish diplomat, joining us live from Copenhagen. Sir, thank you so much for joining us once again. With regards to this development, do you believe that it essentially appeases both sides? What are your thoughts?
I think it's important to take note that there are some exchanges, and the more exchanges we see, this is a sign of at least some willingness really to sort out some of the big consequences of this illegal war. So I think it's showing that there is a will, but you need someone who can broker it. And I think UAE again has played a very important role in securing this kind of humanitarian exchange. So all kudos to UAE.
Right. And as far as these individuals are concerned with regards to the war, do you believe that Putin and Zelensky essentially do not value their lives, in the sense that, yes, whilst they're being evacuated back to their hometowns and bodies are being sent back, do you believe that these leaders essentially hold any value with regards to the lives lost? Like I just mentioned just now, as I reported, 526 bodies from Russia were sent back to Ukraine. That's quite a number of bodies. Do you believe that that number actually stings these leaders' minds, in the sense that maybe possibly diplomatic talks should be held versus war? What are your thoughts?
If we look into the numbers of killed soldiers on both sides, injured personnel as well, I think the numbers that you are mentioning here are very less. But at least it shows that there's a willingness to have these exchanges. But whether it will change the mindset of Zelensky as well as Putin, I could have my doubts. But perhaps when all the bodies are being repatriated back to the village or wherever they come from on either side, perhaps I will raise a little bit some kind of thoughts, reflections among those people who are getting back their deceased relatives and so forth. But obviously, I hope and I think we should really pray for a understanding that will lead to a ceasefire and a peace agreement. But we have seen that not even President Trump could solve this issue overnight. So it will take a lot of efforts, but I guess that people are so tired on both sides, and now it is very apparent that Russia is attacking civilian infrastructure, civilians, and so forth. So at some point in time, this has to stop. They can't apparently stop it themselves, so therefore we need someone and some other nations to step in and secure that we have a peaceful settlement one way or another.
Right. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated. We'll speak soon. Next up at the Cannes Film Festival, acclaimed Iranian filmmaker Asghar Farhadi delivered a powerful message on the ongoing conflict involving Iran, the U.S., and Israel, saying any murder is a crime. Speaking during a press conference for his new film Parallel Tales, Farhadi described witnessing two tragic events during a recent visit to Tehran: the deaths of innocent civilians in the war and the killing of anti-government demonstrators before the conflict began. The two-time Oscar-winning director also expressed sympathy for victims in Israel following Iranian missile and drone strikes, stressing that empathy should extend to all innocent lives lost. Farhadi called the violence extremely cruel and tragic, as his latest film received a strong praise and a standing ovation at Cannes.
On arrive maintenant à la liste de la compétition, dans laquelle il y a 11 entrants. Je vais vous annoncer une liste de 21 films qui ne peut pas tourner dans son pays, l'Iran. Donc il est venu tourner en France un film qui s'appelle Histoire parallèle, au pluriel. Et en effet, ce sont plusieurs histoires qui mêlent un coin de Paris, des gens qui se regardent d'un immeuble à l'autre, des destins qui se croisent, et les comédiens français.
Next up, from overcoming extraordinary odds to becoming a symbol of resilience in Indian sport, the inspiring journey of para cricketer Amir Hussain alone is now heading to the big screen. Announced at the 2026 Cannes Film Festival, the biopic will trace his remarkable life story of courage, determination, and human spirit. Here's a report. Feature film based on the life of inspirational armless cricketer Amir Hussain Lone has been officially announced at the Cannes Film Festival 2026, with the project revealed at the Barth Pavilion during the ongoing festival in France. The film will trace the extraordinary journey of the Jammu and Kashmir para cricketer who overcame severe physical challenges to rise to prominence and become a symbol of resilience, determination, and human endurance in Indian sport. Directed by Nishal Sheth, the filmmaker known for his award-winning debut, Bas Masoor, the biopic is expected to explore both the personal and professional struggles that shaped Lone's life on and off the cricket field. Speaking about the project, the director said the story is not simply about cricket or disability, but about the indomitable human...
आज का भारत सिर्फ आगे नहीं बढ़ रहा
Hello and welcome. I'm Rashan Gidwani and you're watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the headlines for this hour. Pakistan coordinates the return of 11 citizens and 20 Iranians from vessels seized by the United States. The seafarers travel home following the successful intervention by Pakistani authorities. Trump and Xi Jinping concur that Tehran cannot develop completed nuclear weapons infrastructure. Both superpowers call for immediately unblocking commerce in the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi rejects American leadership proposals, citing a complete lack of diplomatic trust. Tehran demands verifiable sanctions actions before cooperating at the negotiation table. Deep internal divisions over the war in Iran prevent BRICS nations from releasing a unified diplomatic declaration. The absence of a formal communique highlights growing geopolitical fractures. The U.S. president also discusses high-stakes defense sales directly with the Chinese leader in Beijing. Washington signals an arms transfers decision is coming expeditiously. Abu Dhabi accelerates an essential infrastructure project to route crude around the Strait of Hormuz. The strategic move aims to secure global energy exports amid intense regional conflict. Prime Minister Modi signals a new era of cooperation by signing major pacts targeting defense and energy infrastructure with the UAE. Both nations strengthen their geopolitical alliance through comprehensive agreements. The Pentagon scraps planned military defense reinforcements in Eastern Europe without prior notice. This extensive pullback sparks immediate strategic concerns across all NATO nations. And here are the top stories for this hour. Iran has urged India to maintain its commitment to the strategic Chabahar port project, describing it as a golden gate for connectivity to Central Asia, the Caucasus, and Europe. Speaking on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in New Delhi, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that while external challenges and sanctions have slowed the pace of investment, the long-term economic and strategic benefits for both nations remain vital. This appeal comes at a critical juncture for the project, following the recent expiration of the U.S. sanctions waiver that previously shielded India's operations at the port. While New Delhi has adopted a cautious approach to funding in recent months due to these shifting geopolitical pressures, Tehran is emphasizing the deep-rooted nature of bilateral ties. Furthermore, the Iranian delegation expressed a strong interest in seeing India leverage its neutral stance to play a more proactive diplomatic role in stabilizing the broader Persian Gulf region. Let's listen in to what Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had to say at the BRICS summit in New Delhi.
Chabahar port is one of the symbols of cooperation between Iran and India. And we are so glad that Indians played an important role in the development of that port. It is now somehow, slowed down because of the U.S. sanctions, but I am confident that this port would be like a golden gate for India to access Central Asia, the Caucasus, and then Europe through this transit route, and also for Europeans, Central Asians, and others to access Indian Ocean. It is a very strategic port, important for both us and India and many other countries. So I hope that Indians would continue their work in this in Chabahar port, so it would be fully developed.
Right, and now joining us to shed some light on this is Elon Pinchas, former Israeli diplomat and foreign policy advisor to former Israeli PM Ehud Barak, joining us live from Tel Aviv. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. With regards to this story, do you essentially see India cooperating with Iran with all that's at stake as far as essentially degrading their reputation or relationship with the U.S.? Will they get involved as far as Chabahar port is concerned? What are your thoughts, sir?
No, I don't know. Look, I don't know. I mean, in the near future, but India has been extraordinarily smart for many decades in developing this so-called independent foreign policy. I'm not talking about the non-aligned period of Nehru in the 50s or 60s. The independent policy, meaning that we have relations with Russia, we have relations with China, we are improving relations with the US. I don't think India would risk all of that for some kind of an agreement with Iran. But now, in the long term, and I'm speculating here, there is a good chance that India, together with China, would cooperate with Iran as part of a Arab Gulf circumventing process, or part of the Road and Belt Initiative, the Chinese policy of Road and Belt. But in the short term, I do not see India aligning itself with Iran at this point.
Right, Mr. Pinchas, please stay with us. We'll be right back with you shortly. I'd also like to bring into the discussion Shruti Dasgupta, International Affairs Analyst, joining us live from New Delhi. Ms. Dasgupta, good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. With regards to what our previous guest just mentioned, what are your thoughts on whether or not India will essentially, again, degrade their relationships with the rest of the world as far as their foreign policy is concerned, and essentially try to broker a deal with Iran or not? What are your thoughts?
But India has always taken a stance that each individual nation and the cost-benefit analysis of their relationship with India is independent of their relationship with anybody else. So with Iran also, that continues to play the same game. Iran is, we did not offer, and we generally put out, I think, 100 crore per year towards the development of Chabahar port. We knew from our diplomatic relationships with the others nations that there would be trouble brewing on this front, and that's why this union budget, and mind you, this budget was passed before the war broke out. So this union budget, we did not allocate a single cent, a single pie. So that shows that we understood that there is going to be troubled waters there. We knew that this is not something that we would need to invest in as of now. We've not pulled out of the project. That shows that we do intend to keep our promises, just not right now, because it ensures that it ensures that we're not fishing in troubled waters, if I may say so, the pun intended, because they say the Chabahar port lies exactly where the US would want to target. I think they did target it during the 60 days of active combat and conflict. And we do not want assets as well as money to be sunk there. So Arakchi's plea to India to continue to have faith in them, and there will be another side of this conflict. We continue to believe that this conflict will end someday. This stalemate that exists in West Asia will come to a point where there will be a formal peace document and alignment to global benefit, and there is when India will restart its investment in the project. So that's exactly what our spokesperson have also told them, Randeep Jaiswal, that we will keep you posted on how things develop. So we're not going to abandon Iran. We're not going to try and take advantage of the current situation to escalate any development there and try and use the Chabahar port for other means. We're not going to ruffle any feathers. Our relationship with Iran stays with it. If they're in a conflict zone, we kind of isolate ourselves from there for the time being. We do offer humanitarian aid to them in terms of food and medicine, but we do not offer military aid. So our help is always available, just not to be exploited towards conflict. We've maintained as a nation that this is not the era of war, because war would damage in such an interconnected global dynamics that we live in. The global economy will not survive a war, as we are seeing the energy shock of this minor conflict between basically 3 nations at most. So this is shown to us that why it is not an era of war. The consequences are not borne by the people who are conflicting, it is borne by the entire world, and hence we try and isolate conflict, even if it is at the cost of a little bit of panic on our partner nation side, that why has India withdrawn the hand. We haven't. The olive branch will stay there, but it will be offered again once the situation stabilizes a little.
Right, Ms. Dasgupta, thank you very much for those insights. We'll speak soon. Ms. Brinkas, please stay with us. Next up, the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator for Lebanon has said that talks between Lebanon and Israel offer a critical opportunity to end the Israel-Hezbollah war, while further drawing attention to the continued strikes in Lebanon. Envoys from both nations resumed a critical second day of direct negotiations at the U.S. State Department in Washington. This marks their third official round of direct talks since the current conflict broke out on March 2nd. The high-stakes talks are unfolding as a shaky, temporary 21-day ceasefire extension is set to expire on the 17th of May. The Lebanese delegation, led by Ambassador Nada Hamadeh and Presidential Special Envoy Simon Karam, is pressing for an immediate cessation of Israeli hostilities, a full withdrawal of Israeli troops, and the return of displaced citizens. Conversely, the Israeli team, led by Ambassador Yeshiel Leiter, maintains that a broader peace agreement hinges entirely on the complete disarmament of Hezbollah. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has formally aligned with the push to disarm non-state actors, publicly urging Hezbollah to surrender its weapons to the Lebanese armed forces. However, Hezbollah has rejected the current terms of negotiation. Despite the diplomatic track in Washington, intense military friction continues to inflict severe damage. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, Israeli military operations since March 2nd have killed at least 2,951 people and injured nearly 9,000. Over 1.6 million residents, roughly 1/5 of Lebanon's population, have been displaced. And now joining us live to tell us more is Alon Pinkas, former Israeli diplomat and foreign policy advisor to former Israeli PM Ehud Barak, joining us live from Tel Aviv. Sir, thank you so much for joining us once again. Essentially, when it comes down to this story, what I just mentioned there is that in 2 days, on May 17th, and after that, the ceasefire that was essentially extended for 3 weeks can essentially, well, it will be over. And then as far as hostilities,
Israeli negotiations as leading to anything fruitful.
Right. Basically, a theory that I've discussed with some guests on this show as well is if Israel and Lebanon essentially work together to disarm Hezbollah. But I believe that in that last statement that you mentioned just now, that seems like quite impossible feat. Is there a world in which that is possible, that Hezbollah by some way, shape, or form essentially reaches some sort of an agreement to go away for good? And then, of course, there is the threat that there will be more terrorist groups that essentially emerge. So how is this essentially stopped once and for all?
Well, it's an excellent question. Look, Hezbollah, for the benefit of our viewers, Hezbollah is the second Shiite terrorist organization that operates in Lebanon. It was preceded by an organization called Amal. But Hezbollah set up with Iranian financing and Iranian arming and Iranian mentoring. Hezbollah set, as I said, a state set up or established a state within a state. You're absolutely right in suggesting or positing the premise that could Israel and Lebanon work together. I don't see that happening. You said in which world? Not in the world that you and I live in, Roshan.
Right. Sir, please stay with us. I'd also like to bring into the discussion now Matthew Vadam, journalist and author, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Vadam, thank you so much for joining us. Now, essentially, let's continue this discussion that I was just having with Mr. Pinkas. To what extent do you believe that Hezbollah can be removed? And do you believe that these talks do serve as a critical opportunity for some sort of a prolonged peace deal between Israel and Lebanon?
Do I think Hezbollah can be removed from power? Well, that's a complex question. It's yeah, they can be. It's a question of whether Israel's willing to do what's necessary to take it out, and it's also a question of what cooperation they're going to get from the actual government in Lebanon. And I'm not really clear if the stars will align for that to happen. But you know, Hezbollah can be eradicated, but Israel is going to have to put in the is going to have to do war fighting in order for that to be accomplished, because they're not going to go away by means of, you know, sanctions or pressure or you know, harsh words. So you know, there is an opportunity. You know, as the UN says, there is an opportunity to end the war. But I'm not sure that it's in the best interest of Israel to actually do that, because Hezbollah, as a proxy of Iran, remains committed to the destruction of Israel, and I can understand why Israel wants to eliminate it.
Sir, please stay with us. We'll be right back with you, Mr. Vadam. I'd also like to bring back Mr. Alon Pinkas, former Israeli diplomat and foreign policy advisor to former Israeli PM Ehud Barak, joining us live from Tel Aviv. Sir, one last question here before we let you go. Are you still with us, sir?
Yes.
Fantastic. Sir, one last question. Essentially, when it comes down to this regional conflict and what's happening between Israel and Lebanon, do you believe that they will essentially try to team up against Iran as well in time to come, in the sense that with regards to wiping out Hezbollah, maybe if they essentially forge the stronger relationship on that front, then the Strait of Hormuz and what's happening in Iran will also be further appeased? What are your thoughts, sir?
Wait, Roshan, let me understand this. You're asking if Israel and Lebanon would team up against Hezbollah and Iran?
No.
Did I get your...
If Israel and Lebanon were to essentially join forces to, one, wipe out Hezbollah and then, of course, go against Iran.
Hezbollah, I don't see that happening. It should happen, you know, in a perfect political science laboratory. It would serve everyone's interests, except Hezbollah's and Iran's, which is why it is likely not to happen.
Right. Mr. Pinkas, thank you so much for joining us. We'll speak soon as we have more developments. Thank you very much. Next up, we do have some breaking news coming in. In a dramatic reversal of party policy, Labour's National Executive Committee has officially cleared Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham to contest the upcoming Makerfield by-election. The decision, confirmed on May 15, 2026, marks a major shift from earlier this year when the NEC blocked Burnham from a similar run. The vacancy was created by sitting MP Josh Simons, who is standing down specifically to pave the way for the King of the North to return to Westminster. While the move is being framed as putting the best players on the pitch, it signals a deepening crisis for Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Following a string of poor local election results and the high-profile resignation of Wes Streeting, who labeled Starmer's leadership dishonorable, Burnham's return is widely viewed as the launchpad for a direct leadership challenge. Now joining us live to tell us more is Matthew Vadam, journalist and author, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Vadam, thanks for joining us once again. With regards to Andy Burnham here, do you believe that he essentially will be able to, one, essentially cause unrest within the Labour Party, and then two, essentially take on Keir Starmer and essentially hold office in time to come?
Well, I think that Burnham is already giving the Starmer ministry, the Starmer government, heartburn. However, the organization, the committee within the Labour Party that gets to decide who stands for office, had been blocking the mayor of Greater Manchester from running in a by-election for the House of Commons, and now it's decided that it's not going to stand in the way, and that it will allow him to stand for office. So that is, and this is a committee that had been controlled by people who were loyal to Prime Minister Starmer. So the fact that they've suddenly done an about-face and decided to let this guy from Manchester run, Andy Burnham, suggests that maybe they think it is time for a change at the top in the Labour Party. Burnham is regarded as being regarded as rather outspoken. He is seen as being to the left of Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is pretty left-wing to begin with, from my perspective. But this guy, Burnham, is even more left-wing, and he, which would probably present electability problems, because given the public's mood in Britain right now, it's hard to imagine them replacing a left-wing government with an even more left-wing government in the near future, the next time an election for the Commons rolls around. So yeah, this guy's going to cause a lot of problems if he becomes a member of Parliament. As a member of the House of Commons, he will also be in a position to directly challenge Starmer on the floor of the House of Commons, and to ask questions and to embarrass the Prime Minister. So it's a bad sign for Starmer, and is more evidence that he is in decline and that he's on his way out.
Mr. Vadam, always a pleasure speaking with you. We'll speak soon as we have more developments. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay.
Next up, the Iranian national football team is set to depart for Antalya, Turkey, this Saturday for a critical pre-World Cup training camp. According to local media, the squad will use the camp to finalize preparations before traveling to their tournament base in Tucson, Arizona. As part of the stint in Antalya, Iran is scheduled to face Gambia in a friendly on May 29th, with officials working to secure a second warm-up opponent to sharpen the team's form ahead of their June 15th opener. Beyond training, the camp serves a vital administrative purpose: visa processing. Amid heightened tensions following the U.S. strikes on Iran in February, Football Federation Chief Mehdi Taj confirmed that no visas have been issued yet. Taj is expected to meet with FIFA President Gianni Infantino to seek assurances for the squad's safe entry. The team, which received a massive send-off in Tehran's Engelab Square this week, is slated to begin its Group G campaign against New Zealand in Los Angeles. Next up, the French Armed Forces General Staff has released striking footage of a high seas intercept in the Atlantic, where naval commando seized nearly 3.4 tons of cocaine from a stateless fishing vessel. The operation, executed on Saturday, May 9th, targeted a craft sailing without a flag, a common tactic for smuggling cartels attempting to evade international jurisdiction. This latest bust marks yet another massive blow to the transatlantic narcotics trade, which has seen a dramatic spike in volume throughout early 2026. This seizure follows an unprecedented streak of success for French maritime authorities across the Atlantic and Pacific theaters. In 2026 alone, the French Navy has intercepted over 18 tons of narcotics, including a massive 4.87-ton haul in French Polynesia and a 4.2-ton seizure in the Caribbean. By coordinating with international intelligence partners like MAUC-N, French forces are increasingly squeezing the maritime cocaine corridor, disrupting the flow of drugs destined for European and African markets. Next up, the World Health Organization is moving to contain a fresh outbreak of the Ebola virus in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. WHO Director General Tedros announced the immediate release of $500,000 from the contingency fund for emergencies to jumpstart the response. Tedros emphasized that the priority is to deploy resources rapidly to both care for those affected and prevent the virus from spreading beyond the current epicenter. 65 people have died and around 246 suspected cases have been identified so far, mainly in the Mongwalu and Rawampara health zones in Ituri province. Africa CDC said 4 of the deaths have been confirmed through laboratory testing. Listen in to what the WHO chief has to say.
WHO will continue working to support the Democratic Republic of the Congo to bring this Ebola outbreak under control, and will deploy resources and work with and mobilize partners across the region to contain its spread and care for those affected. The outbreak is a reminder of the persistent threat to human health of disease outbreaks and the importance of cooperation and solidarity to continually strengthen global health security. We have deployed medical supplies and protective equipment for infection prevention and control to Bunia, the Ituri provincial capital. Today, I have released $500,000 from WHO's contingency fund for emergencies to immediately support the response.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world. Hello and welcome. I'm Rashan Gidwani and you're watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the headlines for this hour. Trump and Xi Jinping concur that Tehran cannot develop completed nuclear weapons infrastructure. Both superpowers call for immediately unblocking commerce in the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi rejects American leadership proposals, citing a complete lack of diplomatic trust. Tehran demands verifiable sanctions actions before cooperating at the negotiation table. The U.S. president also discusses high-stakes defense sales directly with the Chinese leader in Beijing. Washington signals an arms transfers decision is coming expeditiously. Top American executives conclude talks in Beijing with few tangible revenue results. Industrial leaders struggle to secure hard economic concessions. Abu Dhabi accelerates an essential infrastructure project to route crude around the Strait of Hormuz. The strategic move aims to secure global energy exports amid intense regional conflict. The Pentagon scraps planned military defense reinforcements in Eastern Europe without prior notice. This extensive pullback sparks immediate strategic concerns across all NATO nations. Department of Justice officials prepare charges against the revolutionary former president of Cuba. The shock legal offensive threatens to completely upend current Caribbean diplomatic channels. And here are the top stories for this hour. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu acknowledged that Israel now controls 60% of the Gaza Strip, a figure that significantly exceeds the terms of the U.S.-mediated ceasefire reached last year. Speaking on the anniversary of the occupation of East Jerusalem, Netanyahu confirmed that Israeli forces have moved beyond the original October 2025 demarcation lines. Reports indicate that military bulldozers have systematically shifted the yellow line westward, further shrinking the humanitarian zones available to the Palestinian population. This announcement coincides with the 78th anniversary of the Nakba, or catastrophe, marking the mass displacement of Palestinians in 1948. For the millions marking the day, the current expansion in Gaza is seen not as a new conflict, but as a continuation of a decades-long process of dispossession. As displaced families in Khan Yunis and across the region gathered to demand their right of return, the deepening Israeli footprint in Gaza serves as a stark reminder of the ongoing struggle for territory and self-determination in the enclave. And now joining us live is our correspondent, but of course he won't be with us right now. He will be joining us shortly. With regards to the story, I will recap it. Essentially, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu acknowledged that Israel now controls 60% of the Gaza Strip, a figure that significantly exceeds the terms of the U.S.-mediated ceasefire reached last year. Speaking on the anniversary of the occupation of East Jerusalem, Netanyahu confirmed that Israeli forces have moved beyond the original October 2025 demarcation lines. Reports indicate that military bulldozers have systematically shifted the yellow line westward, further shrinking the humanitarian zones available to the Palestinian population. This announcement coincides with the 78th anniversary of the Nakba, or catastrophe, marking the mass displacement of Palestinians in 1948. And now, joining us live to tell us more is Thomas Porteous, correspondent from NewsX World. Thomas, what more can you tell us about this development?
Well, of course, Roshan, you have two contrasting sides when it comes to this day, both in the same territory. Israelis marking Jerusalem Day and Palestinians marking the 78th anniversary of the Nakba, which in Arabic is the word, the catastrophe, in which over 700,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes following the war in 1948, surrounding the establishment of the Israeli state. Now, speaking at one of these Jerusalem Day events, Benjamin Netanyahu expressed and stated to the public there the current situation in Gaza. He claimed that Israel now controls over 60% of the territory in the Gaza Strip, despite this US-brokered ceasefire, which came into effect on October the 10th, which was supposed to restrict Israel of only occupying 53% of the enclave until a further phase was enacted. Following this, of course, we've also seen nearly 1,000 Palestinians killed in Gaza following the ceasefire. Over 80% of infrastructure in the Gaza Strip remains in rubble. And under this ceasefire, Israeli forces were supposed to hold this demarcation called the Yellow Line. They have since gradually expanded beyond it. The NGO Doctors Without Borders have tracked Israel's footprints, rising from around 53% at the ceasefire's inception back in October, at 53%, and now that yellow line is encroaching further on to this agreed Palestinian sovereignty line. When this additional orange line also appeared, where humanitarian organizations must coordinate movements with the IDF, is included. This effective ceasefire footprint exceeds 60%. In terms of further developments, we have seen the new flotilla which has launched today. More than 50 vessels departed from Turkey. Previous instances, we have seen those flotillas intercepted in international waters with certain activists taken back to Israel for questioning. Some activists emerging from Israeli detention alleging some pretty heinous allegations. But that is expected as part of the global Seamood Flotilla's latest attempt to break Israel's naval blockade of the Gaza Strip. Of course, as the Palestinians, both outside but particularly inside the Gaza Strip, commemorate the 78th anniversary of the Nakba, the Gaza Health Ministry has reported that over 72,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 2023. The ministry's records are considered generally reliable by UN agencies and independent experts. Gaza has seen an unprecedented population decline of approximately 254,000 people since the conflict began. The Strip's population currently stands at approximately 2.13 million. So if you look at both sides of the coin today, both the Israelis and the Palestinians, the moods could not be more opposite. We see rows of Israeli flags marching through the streets of Jerusalem today in what is commemorated as a day of pride in Israel. You contrast that with the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and beyond. They see this as a day of misery, but something and a day that they don't forget, that they remember every single year. A day of huge historical significance following that conflict in 1948, which saw Palestinians, nearly a million of them, expelled from their lands. We are seeing commemoration ceremonies in the West Bank, where, of course, the hub Ramallah, where hundreds of Palestinians gathered in the city center with mosques. A mass march also moved towards Yasser Arafat, to the grave of Yasser Arafat, a Palestinian signature, a hugely symbolic figure in Palestinian history. And so, yes, it's the contrasting sides are very vast in today.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Porteous. We'll speak right after this next story. Please stay with us. Now, again, U.S. President Donald Trump briefed reporters on board Air Force One before his departure from Beijing, focusing significant remarks on the domestic and political challenges facing British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The president stated that the British Prime Minister faces difficult fronts regarding energy cooperation and immigration policy. Trump criticized the UK government's recent restrictions on drilling, arguing that Downing Street should commence extensive extraction within the North Sea rather than importing oil supplies from neighboring Norway. He said that the United Kingdom possesses one of the greatest oil finds anywhere in the world, but is unfortunately failing to utilize its true value. Furthermore, the president labeled UK's expanding renewable projects as expensive and destabilizing to landscapes, citing environmental damage to bird populations as an additional economic concern. Trump concluded that Starmer must strengthen both immigration policy and traditional fuel generation to remain in a stable executive position. While offering personal compliments by describing the Prime Minister as a nice man, the president stopped short of calling for his resignation, referring to the current governance challenges as an arduous and expansive situation. Let's listen in to what the U.S. president said while boarding Air Force One.
Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister there, is in a lot of trouble. I know you were asked about this.
Well, he's in trouble for two reasons: energy and immigration. He's very bad on energy. He should open up the North Sea. He's got a gold mine, and he should open up oil in the North Sea, and he doesn't. They have a tremendous value. You know, they buy their oil, a lot of it, from Norway. Norway gets it from the North Sea. Not as good an area as Scotland and the UK has. So they're paying Norway a fortune for oil that they take out of the North Sea.
Do you think Starmer's going to survive as Prime Minister?
It's a tough thing, unless he can straighten out immigration where he's weak. And if he doesn't start drilling, stop with the windmills all over the place that are causing havoc. They're causing havoc. Most expensive form of energy. They kill the birds. They're unsightly. They're ruining the landscape. If he doesn't stop with the windmills, he's got to do energy. He's got to open up the North Sea. You know, he's got one of the greatest oil finds anywhere in the world, and he's not using it. And I tell him that. He's not using it.
Should he quit?
I don't say that. I think he's a nice man, actually. But, I mean, I didn't like when he said, we're going to send ships as soon as you're finished with the war. Well, we're sort of finished militarily, pretty much. But we, you know, David, we finished probably 70-75%. We didn't finish every one of the things. We go back and finish them all.
And now joining us live to tell us more is Thomas Porteous, correspondent from NewsX World. Thomas, what more can you tell us regarding the story?
Well, this is just the latest complicated chapter of that relationship between Donald Trump and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Donald Trump once again going for the policies which he disagrees with the most. He hasn't shied away from talking about them, whether it be immigration, whether it be clean energy. Immigration is certainly a topic which Donald Trump looks down upon in Europe's approach. In fact, in the national security doctrine for the Trump 2.0 term, he spoke about the entire continent of Europe having a problem with immigration, and so that was expected from Donald Trump. He does keep hitting those continuous points again and again. Green energy also being another one. Of course, Europe has a move towards green energy, something which the Trump administration wants to roll back. It has taken the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement, something which he took the US out of in his first term, only for Biden to reinstate them into, and they have once again removed themselves from it. In terms of Keir Starmer and his future in the United Kingdom. Now, of course, this is coming into question in recent days. We've seen the resignation of Health Secretary Wes Streeting. He has seen as analysts and the general public as quite a likable figure, someone who is a possible new candidate as leader of the Labour Party. Due to those disastrous election results, local election results, that we saw just last week, Labour and over 88 MPs have said that they don't trust Keir Starmer's leadership anymore. Donald Trump has reiterated that he thinks Keir Starmer is a nice man, but has gone back to the same problems once again. Keir Starmer domestically has been seen as being too soft on Donald Trump. When he spoke about NATO allies not quite standing on the front lines with US and fellow NATO counterparts, Donald Trump, Keir Starmer's hesitancy when it came to critiquing Donald Trump was critiqued by the British public. But we saw King Charles go to the United States over the past 2 weeks. This was heralded as a genius bit of diplomacy from the Brits, because there is one thing which Donald Trump is known to appreciate about the United Kingdom, and that is the royal family. While Charles was in Washington, he spoke to Congress, the only second monarch to ever do so after his mother, the late Queen. He spoke of the value of NATO and the value of the special relationship going forward, and of course Western liberal democracy and the importance of it staying together. And it is uncertain if Keir Starmer is going to stay on as Labour leader, whether that real leadership bid is going to be, in fact, triggered formally. But Donald Trump, of course, always has things to say. If that happens, we'll be sure to cover it, and we're almost certain that Donald Trump is going to have something to say about it.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us, Tom. We'll speak soon. Much appreciated. Next up, after departing from China, U.S. President Donald Trump has said that he and Chinese President Xi Jinping had talked about Taiwan and Iran, which went well. Just a few days before his visit, President Donald Trump made an arms deal with Taiwan, to which China strongly condemned. Xi warned Trump at the start of their two-day summit in Beijing that there is a risk of conflicts between U.S. and China if the long-standing issue of Taiwan's independence is mishandled. A few hours before, President Donald Trump said that he refused to directly answer Chinese President Xi Jinping when asked if the United States would defend Taiwan if it were attacked by China. After the talks have ended, it seems like the U.S. government might reconsider their stance on Taiwan. Let's go to the American president now and listen in.
So